Look at it. There it is. I want to be on this page. I don't think I want to be on the two pages side by side. Let's make it big. I don't want to be on that page. I want to be on this page. In the 1700s. This is like, how long ago? We are in math class, right?
About 300 years.
Okay, about 300-ish years. Okay. In the 1700s, negative numbers were a crazy idea. Can you imagine negative numbers? Do negative numbers freak you out? They probably did at middle school, right? But do they now? A negative number simply means, for example, you can have 5 of my 4 chickens.
That's a lot. You can't have negative chicken.
That's one.
Doesn't it just mean I owe you a chicken?
No.
Yes. If I owe you $25, am I plus 25 or? Yeah, I'm negative 25. So it really wasn't that far-fetched an idea, but in the 1700s it is. Well, imaginary numbers. They're a little far-fetched even still for today. Imaginary numbers is so fun. It's really not that bad, so don't freak out. Don't make it worse than it is. Before we went to break, x squared equals 9. We solved that. We remember how? We did too. We square rooted it. So if we square rooted both sides, we got x equals. Uh-oh. That's not good. Undo. X equals. What do we got going on here? Okay. X equals something. No, I can't. There's something. When you square root something, what do you have to remember? Such a good question, man.
The plus and minus.
There you go. The plus or minus square root of 9. And the square root of 9 would be?
3.
So we got plus or minus 3. But then we end up with this type of scenario, which would be x equals plus or minus the square root of negative 9.
Nope.
Plug square root of negative 9 into your calculator. What do you do?
It's invalid.
Yeah, we've done this before. It's a non-real, which means it's going to be imaginary. Well, if it's an imaginary, the thing you need to know is I equals the square root of negative 1. I for imaginary. Not so middle school, after all. It was so close. Well, if I equals negative 1, then let's talk about this right here. If I have the square root of negative 9, doesn't that equal negative 1 times 9 like that? Do you agree?
Yeah.
We okay with that? Couldn't I write this like this? Still the exact same thing, right? Well, the square root of negative 1 equals I. The square root of 9 is, so I would have plus or minus 3i. It's just madness, isn't it? This is how it was in the 1700s when they were trying to introduce negative numbers. Now we got negative radicals. So let's try. Square root of negative 9 we just did is 3i. Notice this doesn't have a plus or minus in front of it, correct? You don't add one. Just because there's a radical doesn't mean there's automatically a plus or minus. The only time the plus or minus comes in is when you're doing this and you're solving. If you bring the radical, you got to bring the plus or minus. What's the square root of 16? So what's this going to be? 4i. What about 12? Wouldn't that be like negative 1 times 4 times 3? So what's the square root of 4? 2. Negative 1? What's the square root of negative 1? I. And then what about 3? Got nothing? So it stays. So I got what? 2i square root of 3. 2 has a buddy, so it gets to come out and play. 3 doesn't, so it has to stay in and clean the house. Try that 2 square root of negative 36. What's it doing now? Always something. That one over there. 2 square root of negative 36. Do that. And then do that. What's the square root of negative 36?
6.
Not exactly. What's the square root of negative 36?
6.
There you go. So I got 2 times 6i, which would be, what about negative 27? That would be like negative 1 times, what are my numbers for 27 that interest me the most? 9 and 3, right? Square root of 9 is?
3.
So square root of negative 1 is?
I.
So I got 3i, and then the 3 has to stay inside. You okay with that? Look at your classwork, do number 1 and 2. And if you get done with that and we're not back to this, do number 3 also. Well, you had to give him your hand. Uh-huh. No drawing on people. Number 1,
6i.
6i. Number 2,
2i was 2 square root.
okay, 2i square root of 2. Number 3,
The square root of negative 15.
and
I got
15 is 3 times.
I square root of 15.
Yep. The only thing that can come out is the negative, right? If there's a negative inside of the radical, that means it comes out as an I. But other than that, I got 15, which is 3 times 5. There's no buddies, right? So the 15 stays inside. Okay? Let's go to this page. It's the other page of your notes.
This one.
We know now that, we kind of know now, that I equals the square root of negative 1. That means everywhere there's a square root of negative 1, we can replace it with I. Well, what if I asked you what is I squared equal?
Wouldn't it just be negative square root of 1?
Sure.
Just 1. And it's negative 1.
It's negative 1. For example, take a look. You've got I equals the square root of negative 1. Do you agree? If I squared these, now I have I squared. And I've got what? The square root of negative 1 times the square root of negative 1? Don't I have buddies?
Sure.
So I get I squared equals negative 1. So what about I cubed?
Negative I.
Do you agree?
No, I think it's negative I.
We already learned all of this.
When? Where?
Your AP algebra 2.
Yes, we're not there.
Nah, we're in regular old.
Looking at this, it's I cubed, right? Do you agree I cubed is the same thing as I times I squared? So I got I times I squared. Well, what does I squared equal? Well, what does I equal? It's just I, right? So what's 1 times negative 1? I times negative 1. Negative I? That's the worst of this whole thing. That right there. So looking at that idea, can you multiply these? Negative 9 times negative 5 times 2. Yes, you can.
It's
90. And then I also get I cubed. Do you agree?
Yep.
Okay, so what does I cubed equal?
Negative I.
So that means I got 90 times negative I. So how would I write that?
Negative 90.
Yes. Very, very good. Looking at your classwork, let's go to do number 4. While you're at do number 5. Then you can do number 6 too. 4, 5, 6. It's just 4, 5, and 6.
No, you was confused earlier.
I square root of 50. I was gonna do that, but
So, going back to this one, let's try our next scenario. This works just like what you're already used to. These i's, they combine just like combining like terms. So I've got negative 7 plus 12, which would give me negative 5. Do you agree? 5i and 3i is just 8i.
No, you get positive 5.
No? Oh, yes, I would.
Yeah.
There you go. Fixed it. My bad. Then I got 5i and 3i, which would give me 8i. These two aren't like terms, though. I got a constant and I got a 5. I got a constant and I got an imaginary number, so that's it. You can't do anything else with it, right? So it's just like combining like terms. You're done. So looking at your paper, do number 8. 9. Don't tell me about that.
I mean, the way you said it was kind of basic.
Once again, just like combining like terms, but this time you'll notice there's a minus sign in between. You got a couple of choices. You could put a 1 there and distribute it, right? So I got 6 plus 3i. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. Negative 1 times negative 4i is positive 4i. Did I do all that correctly? It's always a good question because you never know. Then I know, I'm showing you one way. 6 plus 1 is 7. 3 plus 4 is 7i. Or, you could say 6 minus minus 1. What's minus minus? Plus, so 6 plus 1 is 7. 3 minus minus 4i. Minus minus is?
Plus.
So 3i plus 4i is 7i. Whichever one works for you. Bounce over, let's do 12 and 13. Oh, geez. This goes back to, you remember when we had something like x plus 1 times x minus 1? Or 2, whatever, who cares? And we did all this kind of stuff? Called foiling, right? We took front.
No, you're
So this works the same way. So I got 2 times 8 is, what do you think, Avery?
I'm thinking like,
Like you were talking too much?
no.
2 times negative 3i would be negative 6i.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
5i times 4 plus 40i. Oh, you want me to send the video to Avery's? Here.
I'd like to give a big shout out to Keith and Lacey.
5i times negative 3i. Negative 15i squared. Right? I times I squared. X times x squared. So, what does I squared work? What does I squared equal?
Negative 1.
Negative 1. So I got negative 1 here. This is a minus 15. These two right here, will they combine? Are they like terms?
Yes.
And I get what?
34.
So 34i, and then over here I just got the 16 still. Negative 15 times negative 1 is positive 15. Positive 15 plus 16.
31.
So I got 31 plus 34i. Yes?
Sure.
Because, well, we haven't gotten there yet. So let's do 14, 15. Because you have a typo.
Alright.
Same thing. We're just going to multiply everything. So I got x times x, giving me x squared. I got x times negative 3i, which gives me negative 3xi. I got 3i times x, which gives me positive 3xi. Oh, jeez. I got 3i times negative 3i, which gives me negative 9i squared. What happens to these two? They're the same but different signs, so they end up becoming 0, right?
Yep.
So I got x squared, and then what's this right here?
Negative 1.
Plus 9.
So I squared, thank you sir, is negative 1, negative 9 times negative 1 would be, and this positive 9,
So it would be 9x squared?
x squared plus 9.
They're
They're
not like terms.
not together. You can't put them together. They're not being multiplied, they're just being
Do you
added.
just leave it alone then?
Yep, that's it, you're done.
That's
And
it,
this
we're
is
done?
really the whole purpose behind this. We had parabolas, right? And some of those parabolas, the vertex would sit on the x-axis. Do you recall those?
Yep.
Some of them, it would cross the x-axis like so. But then there'd be this one, which would be the parent function shifted up 9. Does it cross the x-axis? No, but every single one of these has a degree. For example, these are squared, which means there has to be 2 answers. But there's none. But we have to be able to solve it, so we have imaginary numbers. That's the whole...
Miss Moon,
Yeah?
I was wondering, when are we ever going to use this?
I'm so glad you asked.
Oh, no.
Don't
If
go
we
to
could
the
pick-
chart.
No.
Don't go to the chart.
It would depend on
Stay
what
away
field
from the
you're
chart.
going to.
Like
But
build the
electrical.
calculator.
Stay away
The
from the
electrical
chart.
field is definitely used. I'm not going to the chart. I was ready for the question.
Were you?
However, closest proximity to you would be 2 classes away on the quiz.
Oh,
Yeah?
she's stealing.
All right. I see you.
So, let's
throwing that
try, what do we want?
Damn.
Nothing.
Haha,
Take over
20,
my
do
life.
20.
It's so shady in here.
Didn't have it on yet. Here we go. X squared plus 9 equals, I think we kind of already did this one. X squared equals negative 9. Do you agree? So then I'd have to do the square root plus or minus the square root of negative 9. Huh? What do you mean what? We just did it up there.
Where are we at?
Right here. Your paper looks just like mine.
Does it?
Yep.
Wow.
Your writing might be a little different, but yeah. So, yeah, it's just a typo, and that's on the other page. What's the square root of negative 9?
3. Skirt. No.
Square root of 9 is 3. 3i. So I got plus or minus 3i.
That doesn't look like plus or minus.
I tried real hard. Let's make it a full page.
Oh, boy.
What is up with you people? Okay, next. What would I do first?
What? What do we do first? Minus 75.
Okay, so I get 3x squared equals negative 75.
Yep.
What did I do next?
Square root.
No, I wouldn't. Divide by 3. So I get x squared equals negative 25.
Then you square root.
Now I square root both sides to get x equals
And then
plus or minus negative 25. Well, what's the square root of negative 25? 5i. Very good. Plus or minus 5i. It's a quadratic. It's a degree of 2, which means it has to have 2 answers. It has an answer of 5i and negative i. Negative 5i. What would I do? Subtract 48, yes. Now what? Both sides? Plus or minus? What about 48? What are my numbers that I'm interested in?
Probably 8 and 6.
8 and 6, I have issues with that one. How about 16 and 3?
I like that one better.
The reason is because we know the square root of 16, right?
Just 4.
8 and 6, now I gotta go find some more 2s. You get with all the 2s, okay? So anyway, square root of 16,
4.
I got 4.
E.
I. And then 3 doesn't have a button, so it stays inside.
Well, I mean, I just have to eat down in Spanish.
Well, we are
This
in
is
America.
We're in a good
This is
With your mouth work.
2 years of Spanish class don't mean anything.
Try 22. Looking at this one, how is this one different from these 3?
It has x squared.
They all have x squared.
They have negative 2x.
It has an x term, right?
Yes.
So I can't do this quick little way. This one, if I saw right up, the first thing I'd probably do is try factoring, right? So we would do our little x thing over here, and we would say, oh, this times this is 5, and this is negative 2. So I need 2 numbers that multiply to give me 5, and combine to give me negative 2. Well, 1 and 5 is all you're getting to multiply to get 5, so how do 1 and 5 combine to give you negative 2? They don't, which means you can't factor it. So this was one of those problems that we had to either do complete the square or quadratic formula. You pick which one you want to do. I'm letting you pick. Complete the square or quadratic formula.
How about we like don't do complete the square because I won't like.
Quadratic formula.
So we want to do quadratic formula?
Yes.
First class that picked that. And that actually is more beneficial because that's actually what you're going to do with this. So, quadratic formula goes negative b plus or minus b squared. Does somebody want to sing it to that song? 4ac.
I must not
Plus
been
or
there.
minus.
It's to row, row, row your boat.
Square root.
Oh, jeez. So, I got what? A is 1, B is negative 2, C is 5. Plug in my what? Negative b would be 2. Plus or minus. Square root, what's b squared?
It's 4.
What's b squared? 4. Minus 4 times a times c. 4 times a times c.
Negative 1.
Minus 20. I don't know what you're doing. 4 times 1 times 5.
4. Oh, yes.
Yes. And then on the bottom is 2a, so that'd be just 2 times 1, which is 2. Then we got what? 2 plus or minus. What's 4 times 20?
4 minus 20.
4 minus 20, thank you.
Negative 16.
Well, at least you're paying attention now.
Of course.
Kind of, sort of.
Always paying attention.
Of course. There's no of course to that. Okay, what's the square root of negative 16?
It's 4i.
4i. Look at all 3 of those. Do they have anything in common?
No.
I mean, we can get rid of that 2 on the bottom.
And the 2 on the
2 will
top.
go into 2, 2 will go into 4. It has to be able to go into both. If
So
it
it's
can't go
just
into both,
plus or
you can't do
minus
it.
2i.
Plus or minus 2i.
Is that the big thing?
What's 2 divided by 2?
1,
Okay. What's 4 divided by 2?
2. Why do we have to put the 1 up there?
Did
Because
never
it's
mind, never
1.
mind.
It's not 0.
Oh, jeez, man.
You good with that?
I'll pass.
You'll pass.